Why do you think people are moving away from ecom? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I've had like 4 different founders who are like visiting SF who are like broadly in the ecom SaaS space tell me that they're building to move outside of ecom. So, and then like the unsurprising things they're also asking for like fundraising advice. But the uh yeah, the part about it that's scary is that they're all saying that they're trying to move outside of ecom. Um, and it is correlated to fundraising. So I did you guys hear this podcast with like Tomer and Sean and Robin and Taylor? Did you
I
hear
saw
this?
it. I saw it. The Yotpo one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What were they saying?
I think that the scary observation that they had, which is probably correct, is that to build a venture scale outcome in ecom is like tremendously difficult. And like close to impossible on Shopify alone. And so given those two observations, I think a bunch of venture funded founders in the ecom SaaS space, or at least the ones that I have been chatting with, are intentionally seeking to leave e-commerce, basically. So like I think like not only are they correct, but the people who are building for the space are actively looking to depart it, which is, just to be clear, that's like very bad news for everybody involved, especially for the ecom brand founders, because basically what it means is that they're not getting invested into, right? Like the building of tools for you is the downstreaming of investment, just like how we, like you and I, benefit from the investment going into the AI companies because then we use those tools and they provide leverage to our business.
So I feel like part of this is potentially what happened in the e-commerce space with SaaS is that people started solving problems that potentially didn't need to be solved, or they were solving problems in which didn't have like that interesting of like an impact on these businesses, right? Like if you look at like the Shopify app ecosystem and then you think about like the success of an e-commerce store, the fundamentals matter so much more than like anything else. And in a way, like the incremental lift is like usually an anomaly um, of like a lot of tools, right? Like it's just like the companies that have the best brand and the best people behind them and the best distribution and the best product essentially win. And like there's not many like widgets that make a thing that wouldn't have won win, or even the ones that are winning like win, you know, drastically more. And then the other piece is that inherently like I had this thought like the other day actually where I was thinking back to like old school Kickstarters, physical product Kickstarters that were like e-commerce focus. And what was like the thing on every single one of those like PDFs that they would like design in the Kickstarter page? It was like, we're cutting out the middleman. Like instead of buying your razors from Gillette that goes to CVS that goes to you, we're cutting out the middleman. And those businesses had like interesting sort of like unit economics because of that. But but then what we found was like for these businesses to scale, the middleman just became Meta and Google. And so inherently like these have morphed into like very non-profitable businesses for most people, especially in the scale up space. And so you have like a situation where these businesses are heavily just reliant on product and distribution. And then the thing that actually exists on your website in many cases doesn't make that much of an impact. And so like the better reviews app and like the better like these are like incremental small minute upgrades to a EBITDA like to an EBITDA base that is inherently going to be small already. So it's like, and then when you're talking about like venture outcomes and like what pricing needs to be for SaaS for that, it's like it doesn't like make that much sense. Outside
Yeah,
of these core things like Klaviyo, which is like we send emails to all of your customers, and like when you send emails to those customers, they make a lot of money. Getting like 10% more reviews has like a small impact. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of just like, I think maybe
Yeah,
what's
I think that the question it would invoke, Zach, I'm curious how you would frame this, is why do people go back to Klaviyo over the like 100 other ways you can send email? So by the way, like let's just assume it must be true. Like let's take for granted email is a must-have thing to run an e-commerce business, right? So it's like if you have any form of like repeat in your purchase mechanism or anything like that, you will send emails. Like maybe you don't have to send emails if you're like a one-shot sale. So like, for example, TikTok shop, if somebody buys from your TikTok shop and you have a product that's designed to sell through TikTok shop, maybe you don't care. I'm not saying that it's true, but I'm like trying to create a toy example. But let's just say for most businesses, you must send a reminder somehow. So you've got to like send an email. I think the natural question it begets, if you're correct, is why does everyone choose Klaviyo? Like,
so
why not choose the cheaper option?
I think there's like a few things. Like one, like for like a really growing, like well operated store, the amount that you pay Klaviyo is it still pales in comparison to the amount of money that it's like generating you, which I don't think exists for a lot of other sort of like software tools that aren't as important as email. And so what I'm saying is like that these businesses are built on like a few very important pillars, and Klaviyo is that one. And like their timing was really good. And I mean, like I also think like okay, like strategically, why do I think Klaviyo is like succeeded over a long period of time? Like a bit anecdotally, it's like wow, their agency partner program was like incredible. Like when I was running my agency, I was like making $5,000 or something a month on just like affiliate, like referral, like partner stuff. So it's like you have, and like most brands aren't running their own email like in-house. So it's like built by the agency. So it's like, okay, you have like a certain critical mass of like all the best agencies are using Klaviyo. So it's like, oh, like, so it's like, I think it's one of these just like, and like Klaviyo hasn't really dropped the ball that hard. Like they've had hiccups along the way, but they've never dropped the ball incredibly hard on product. It's always been good outside of like a few like really public outages and things like that, but that exists like everywhere. And then the other thing is because it's one of these core pillars, you can't have it go down. On Black Friday, when you're sending an email to 5 million people, you can't have it go down because it's like, it's game time, it's the Super Bowl, and like everything needs to work. And so I think people are just like, okay with that because they know like Klaviyo bill equals revenue. But I don't think that the same feeling exists for most of the Shopify pieces.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
agree. I like what you said, Rashad, about pillars. You know, brands need to send reminders. One of those ways that they send reminders is with email, but they also send it with SMS and push notifications. They have an app or they want to send push notifications to Chrome browsers, to browsers in general. Pretty much none of the other providers provide all of those. PostScript is just SMS. Yotpo dropped out. There's Omnisend. I guess they actually have some market share. There's MailChimp. They have some market share as well. There's a lot of focus on Klaviyo, but there are other players in the space. But
Can
yeah,
I ask you guys a question then?
Yeah.
Then what's the incentive to build?
Venture-backed thing in the Shopify ecosystem?
No. So let's just say those dynamics are true, like what you just described. So let's assume that that's true. And it's like I don't have a good way necessarily to like debate that, right? Like that's a pretty reasonable view. And so if you were to take that view and you are someone who can like take investment dollars, whether your own time or through raising capital or whatever it may be, and apply it somewhere, why would you choose to apply it into this ecosystem?
Well, so I think that depends on, so like if you were like a kid coming out of like school and you didn't have any market expertise and you were going to go and try to find a problem to solve and you haven't experienced things and you don't have like critical knowledge through experience in a specific industry, like obviously don't choose e-commerce. Because like the world is so large and like your brain is so green and like there's definitely better, higher leverage industries. However, for example, in my case, because of my background, I had concentrated knowledge in one specific area and I had a problem that I personally wanted to solve, but I didn't need to seek the problem. Problem found me, and then it becomes a useful thing. As it plays out over like what 4 years old, like almost this month, right? And it's like if I took this last 4 years and worked in a different industry, like could I have potentially made something larger? Maybe. But then also I would have to say that I'm giving up all of like the kind of head start that I had to start it, which made the success likelihood higher from day one. So it's like, I don't think that there's that much, like you have to, if you really love it, right? Like if you obsess about this stuff and you're like, I really love making Shopify stores more money, then that's a reason to do it. But I wouldn't say that there's like dynamics in the ecosystem that are like pointing directly at this.
I think you're the best person to answer this, though, Rashad. I can't say that Klaviyo is going to be the main player forever, but people are investing in Fermat to improve the state of e-commerce for brands. Why are they doing that?
I'm a good fundraiser, I guess, is the TLDR. But I first of all, I don't disagree with Zach. Like I think that actually the problem, but I don't know that you and I would agree on the underlying reasons why. And maybe that's why there's a distinction. So like I agree that for especially for the Shopify ecosystem, the propensity to pay, because these businesses are so unprofitable. You said something really critical there during the scale up phase. So like call it $5 to $100 million of revenue of GMV for an e-com brand. You're so unprofitable and your cash conversion cycle is so painful that like the incremental dollar that you spend really gets scrutinized. I think that that's true for sure. And basically like all of your investment as a brand during that phase goes into like only the critical infrastructure things, which is like your ads, your ability to accept payments, your 3PL, and the addition of new products to take you from like 10 to 100. Because
And inventory.
almost exactly,
like,
and inventory. Yeah,
out,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, inventory is what screws the cash conversion cycle. Exactly. Yeah. And so like, and so basically like that window. There's some like actually, Zach, and I promise, Jack, I'll answer the question. But like, Zach, I'm curious for your, and actually, yeah, Jack, your ecom. Dude, I don't know why I keep forgetting you had an ecom business, but when you were under 5 in GMV, was the cash conversion cycle that painful?
We never passed 5 million in GMV, my business.
Was the cash conversion cycle painful at low scale?
No, we had digital products. It was incredible.
Oh, okay. And Zach, what about you?
So we had 50% of our business was like stuff that we held inventory for, and 50% of the business was things that were like print on demand, like a lot of art and things like that. And so the cash conversion cycle on print on demand was like really well. So it wasn't that painful. But I will say, like, I was running that business as like a piggy bank as well. Like it was like, I was just trying to turn like $1 into $1.30, $1.40, like on a 30-day rolling basis. And like,
and you can do that sub 5 million, right?
You can do that sub 5 million. And then where like all of the pain came, and the reason why I left was just like, there was this moment where it was like, you actually have to like this business to go to the next level. And I fucking hated the product. I hated it was like, this is horrible.
Dude,
so
this is my big.
Yeah.
So now I'll finally answer your effing question. And I'm not trying to dance around it, but like, this is my thing that I finally realized. And I don't know how I've been building this business for almost 4 years now. And I realized it like 4 months ago. Okay. So like, I'm clearly an idiot, right? But I realized it after I raised money. Thank God. Which is that like between the $5 to $100 million range, the cash dynamics and the economics of these businesses are really hard, like really hard. And so actually the market has this very weird barbell where under 5 million, like it's people who are kind of running it on the side just to like produce cash, and they're kind of happy. And like a lot of them are like weekend warriors and we all have friends in that bucket. And so it's like, you kind of realize like, actually, wait a second, like these people are kind of like happy. And it's like, if you can like do something that is high ROI for them, they're like, as long as it's not like a ton of effort, they'll like do it. And then they're also happy. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of like stay happy. Between 5 and 100, like, man, these people are stressed. Like, I don't know a brand operator in that range who is not stressed. Okay. And correctly so, because the business is so hard. And so I have like tons of respect for all of the, and we have like lots of customers in this range, but it's like, I have tons of respect for these people, but like, I now much more deeply understand like what their business feels like. And then you go to like north of 200 or like the billion to $5 billion range. And now we're talking about like a totally different set of dynamics where it's like there are digital transformation projects, there are AI transformation projects. Like there's like real work that you do to like move the needle on these large enterprises that is of very high value. Because it's like so hard to get things like sort of like moving at that scale. And that's the main thing that I realized, Jack, to answer your question. And so like I arrived at the same place that if you were to listen to this podcast and we'll be talking to Tomer soon. But I arrived at the exact same place that I think Tomer, it seems like, arrived at, which is actually there is a lot of work to do. It's just you're never going to build a very big company, serve it. And now I'm really curious what PJ would say to this statement. But it's very hard to build a very big company in the like $5 to $100 million range, serving the $5 to $100 million customer, Zach, for the exact reasons that you described. Now, I also think it's true that ecom, the most beautiful thing about ecom is the signal, which is why Meta loves ecom. Because you click on an ad and you click on the purchase button and you get data. And data drives the internet. Like, and I think people truly underestimate that ads and e-commerce are basically the reason the internet works. And that is like lost in so much of this like discussion, because if we didn't have that dynamic, like the way we interact with the internet would not be the same, because all of these services would not be for like free. You know what I mean? Like everything would change. And that part of the dynamic is the part, Jack, that actually keeps me like loving this part of the ecosystem. Is like, yes, I'm going, like, it is my job to build a very big business, but why am I like roughly in this space? It is because like there is a very valuable thing that gets produced in the immediateness of the data feedback loop that comes out of e-commerce that can then benefit a much larger variety of businesses. And that's how I think about it. And that's like like without oversharing, but that is how we think about what is the end impact of Fermat. Right? Because we power all of the consumer experiences. And so we have all of the consumer data.
That's interesting. It's interesting, that point of signal as well, and then the flow of funds. I'd love to hear what you guys think about competition and how competition might be squeezing out a lot of the players in e-commerce that maybe shouldn't exist. Maybe some of them are operating at very tight margins right now because they have to spend quite a lot on advertising, but really they would be dead otherwise, because there are just better players in the space. But the market demand is so large that they get to survive being mediocre and not actually being very exceptional at all, right? But getting enough customers, operating at high enough margins.
You mean like SaaS companies servicing e-commerce getting squeezed, or e-commerce brands themselves?
I think maybe both. Yeah, maybe, you mentioned this earlier about problems that don't need to be solved, right? Somebody is solving a problem that doesn't need to be solved, but there's enough people. There's enough demand.
Maybe I should clarify that statement. There's problems that can be solved, and if they can be solved without venture dollars, they should be solved without venture dollars. And so potentially there's problems that are being solved with venture dollars that shouldn't have been solved with venture dollars. I would consider our business to be one of them. There's a really interesting thing that's happening for me right now, and I might eat my words on this, but our venture-backed competitors are not seemingly doing that well, and they're not putting the venture dollars to work in a way that is like sustaining or building it that big of a business. There's some people that are getting kind of like gobbled up and then thrown out. There's some that are like trying to figure out how to make these like unit economics work for the amount that they've raised and all of the dilution that the founders have, seen, and the speed that they've moved at has led to like a bunch of shrapnel around them in which they have to like kind of tiptoe around. And in a way, like I've never been more confident in my desire to bootstrap because of like the current like climate that we seem to be in. And I don't know, some of this might be like rose colored glasses because we're like growing really fucking well in like the last like 90 days. But it seemed like all of the signal that used to tell me that I might be doing the wrong thing has dissipated. And then there's increased signal that I'm doing like the right thing. And I still don't know exactly what I would do if I like raised like $75 million, but I also just might not be sharp enough to figure that out.
I have lots of things that I can respond to there. Should we start with the competition side? I think competition is only like multiplied by the amount of money you raise. Like the effectiveness of your competitor has nothing to do with whether or not they raise money. And their end state outcome gets pulled forward because they have raised money. And so actually whether or not you raise money, it like really doesn't change how good of an operator you are. And like actually a good example of this is I did this exercise recently, which is going to be only interesting to you guys and like to none of our listeners, almost certainly. But I like looked at every round we raised, who was on my competitor slide. Because you know how like you put together this stupid competitor slide where you're always on the top right or whatever? And like 100% of those companies died, right? Like every time I put one, or like I looked at the slides that people would show me, I appeared on their slide like over time, and all of those people are dead. Like they don't exist anymore, basically. And and many of them raised more than me, right? Because they were able to raise in 2021 where you could raise like a $20 million A off of like no revenue and like just a good story. And we were a little bit later, and there were so many different companies that people would ask me like, oh, but what about this and what about that? And by the way, that's happening today too. There's like all of these like agentic commerce companies that people are like, oh, what about this? What about that? And I'm like, I've been through like 4 cycles of people because like every year there's some like new crop that emerges and like everybody else dies, right? And so I'm just not sure, Zach, that the raising or not raising of funding has anything to do with whether or not you build a good business. I think either you build a business or you don't build a business.
Well, it makes a difference because like there's more reasons that you can die when you put like the venture sort of like when you touch that like forbidden stone type thing. Like there's
I think
like,
you just pull it forward.
you mean it would have failed anyway, and then
Correct.
Okay, but that doesn't take into account shifting like market dynamics and like the ability for a business. So like one thing that I've kind of been thinking about a lot lately is if you just don't die, it increases like the likelihood of like long-term success. And like very much believe, and I don't mean, but when I mean don't die, I mean like continuously building like a solid business, because like the product that you launch with isn't the product that you exit with in most cases. And so like you're like, if you just avoid all of the landmines and like you keep building, like eventually like you're in like a really, really solid spot. And like you start to take advantage
I think
of
you're
compounding.
Yeah, dude, you are like super either underestimating what it means to avoid landmines or overestimating everybody else's capability. I don't know which one of those two it is. like the statement that you're making that is highly nuanced is the fact that you're just continuously building a good product and like not doing things that will kill your business. And all I'm suggesting is that capital, all it does is accelerate the rate at which something would have otherwise happened anyway. And so the operator who chooses to invest the capital into those like other things or into those other domains is the one who is like seeing the landmine and running towards it faster.
But that's like on an individual thesis. So what I'm saying is that if you survive, you can form more thesis over time.
I understand that, but the act of surviving is active. It's not passive.
I didn't say it was passive, but I'm meaning like,
and that active work that you're doing is actually the distinction.
So let's just say like you have like a 1-year-old business at like $1 million of ARR. And then you have like a 3-year-old business at $1 million ARR. And at that moment, they're growing at the same rate. I would argue that the business that is 3 years old, that is growing at the same rate now than the $1 million that's 1 year old, has a higher likelihood of making right decisions. And I think that the $1 million of ARR in most cases on the 3-year-old business is stickier than on the 1-year business.
Totally.
And so right. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, dude. Sorry, we're agreeing. I am agreeing that if you last longer, then you are likely to build a better business. I'm simply suggesting that is empirically true because of the fact that the operator is better. It is not true because you have lasted that time. And that operator being better would be better or worse, not based on like they're just a good operator. And the good sorry, let me say to you differently. You said the words, if I raised 75 million, I would not know what to do with it. What I would say back to you is that is precisely the point. Precisely the point is that you would not go and spend it on a bunch of things in order to run into a bunch of landmines.
Got it. Okay, I know what you're saying now.
Yeah. And so like all of these other companies. Now, I think that leads to like a totally different point, which is like what kinds of people raise money, and what is the game that an investor is playing by investing into companies where like you're investing into people who are going to operate at extremely high velocity, and you're kind of expecting that a subset of them are just going to run into landmines very fast and will just blow up. But a subset of them, because they end up happening to be good operators or because of luck, and either one, it actually does not matter which one of those is true. As long as they're operating at very high velocity, you will get your return profile in time to actually return back to your LPs. And so from the investor standpoint, it's also totally rational to like make those investments. Yeah. But yes, you're correct that you're like, your VC backed competitors will die faster than your non VC backed competitors, but they will both die. Yeah. Isn't that wild?
I think there's something interesting in this about raising, not increasing competition, and pulling forward your end state, putting aside, CapEx activities, time to market, speed of execution, access to talent. Those funds, when you raise, are incentive. We talked about customers and the market producing signal with their purchases and their activity. And you asked, what's the incentive to build in ecom? To what extent does the flow of funds create that incentive to build? In one industry instead of another.
Most of it.
All of it.
Most of it.
Right?
That is like, that is the job of capitalism.
Right.
Of like the funds to flow to the place where you want to create an incentive to build.
So you were saying earlier, Rob, that like you've been experiencing like a lot of VC-backed software companies in the e-commerce space now looking for like off-ramps sooner than they should. And like, and so you're saying there's like some fear around that. Do you think it's because you think it's going to change the flow of capital into the space when that cycle sort of like ends?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to share an observation that may be related, and then we can like try to figure out the answer together. There's a completely unrelated SaaS business. So they do like developer tools. Okay. Who has similarly experienced that their SMB market and their large enterprise market are the fastest growing and their mid market is hollowing out. Now, I'm like trying to think, given all of these observations and given the companies that are growing the fastest, so like these AI companies and things like that, where is their revenue coming from? And their revenue is also bimodal. It's like the VSMBs or the extremely large enterprises who are spending a lot. And that kind of makes me wonder, like, oh my God, like what is happening to the mid-market in America, period? Which has an outsized impact in e-com because Shopify is overrepresented in that bucket. But I'm not sure actually that this is an e-com phenomenon, which is an even scarier. I mean, like, look, by the way, I don't want any of this to be true, right? But I think what may be happening, and there's like, and so like the sort of optimistic way of viewing this is like, oh my God, like this current wave of AI is giving superpowers to like the smallest businesses. Because there are individuals or two people who can now do things that they could never do before. And like the biggest evidence of that is like Lovables and like these types of companies where it's like, dude, like there's like roughly $500 million a year right now being spent by individuals who think that they can like build a business. Okay. That is a fucking insane number when you say it like that. And then there's another bucket, which is the largest enterprises trying to improve efficiency. So like when you look at Shopify, Klaviyo, all these companies that are like crushing it, they have grown their top line revenue. Like this is the whole Jason Lemkin thing. You remember what he was sharing with us? Like revenue grew 91% over 3 years while the employee base went down 30%. And so the impact of AI on the largest businesses is also very powerful. And so I think we're just in a tech cycle where actually the middle is not seeing the benefit that the sides are.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the middle is struggling for lots of different reasons, including they don't have as good cash conversion cycles because they're not just like weekend warriors and like they don't have the efficiencies of a large business. And so there's like this big middle bucket, no matter what type of business you are, that's like having a very hard time. And in the SaaS world, like the more I reflect on this, it's like even crazier. Like think about like Intercom, Airtable, like all these companies. Okay, they're like a couple $100 million ARR businesses, roughly, and like we would call them mid-market SaaS businesses, right? Dude, they are completely reinventing themselves as AI businesses, and now they're measuring the growth rate of their AI business. They don't even measure the like growth rate of the existing business because they're realizing they need to reinvent themselves.
Do you think it could be one of these situations where like there's this book, Crossing the Chasm, right? And just talking about businesses kind of like transforming. It's like when you're crossing the chasm with like solid ground, the steps in front of you look a lot like the steps behind you, but they increasingly become different over time. But if you're crossing the chasm during a time of like shaky ground and a ton of uncertainty, it's actually more like lily pads rather than stairs. And in which like you kind of need to like fully step off of the first step before you can get onto the other step, rather than like a normal like staircase you can like walk up one by one. Whereas like this, you kind of need to be like hopping. I think that could be like kind of just like what's happening like in the world. It's like you have these businesses with like a lot of product market fit, but to get to what will be the next version, it actually is like leaps rather than steps. Which like then you can argue that like, oh, like these are now maybe some of like the highest risk businesses. Kind of.
Dude, I think. Do you see evidence to the contrary? Like,
no. And then I also think like, I mean, I was listening to a podcast the other day. It was like it's called Your Mom's House. It's a comedy podcast. And like all of the ads were like B2B SaaS. And I was like, this is like fucking really interesting. Like, but like some of them like B2B, B2C, like Shopify, for example, or like, you know, like I'm like, yeah, like they was probably spending a bunch of money on a bunch of stupid stuff, but like this seemingly doesn't make much sense at all. But then I thought like, well, maybe like these companies are really just focused on like these B2B companies going downstream and like hopping over like the mid-market, because yeah, like if you can add, you know, hundreds of thousands of people on like a base Shopify plan is potentially more impactful than grabbing like 1,000, 100, you know, $10 million Shopify stores.
dude, from Klaviyo's S1, you guys know how many customers Klaviyo has? They have 180,000 customers. And how many of those customers pay Klaviyo more than $50K a year?
I'm going to say 10% too.
10%. So like 16,000. Yeah. It's like 3,000. Okay. So the like the wonky thing here is, but it's like 20% of their revenue. Okay. And so there's like a massive barbell that is happening, right? And yeah, I just don't know. You know what I mean? Like you hear data like this and you're like, the prize in the middle is just not that big because those businesses are the ones that are struggling. Like I think about Fermat, for example. Like we're like a okay customer probably to like another, because I don't know, we buy like tons of SaaS, right? Like SaaS companies buy the most SaaS. And so, because we're like in what you would describe as the middle, right? We're not small. We're not an enterprise. And I was like, yeah, man, like we are probably a pretty shitty customer. Like if I were to think about it, because I will at the like flip of a dime, if I decide to, I will like shift the strategy and like churn like 20 SaaS things at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, and I will have like no qualms about it, right? Because I'm not at like $500 million where I have like all of this stuff that I'm like trying to optimize and like all, you know what I mean? And I'm also not.
There's not as much downstream negative effects of that decision, right? Like on a company with 15,000 employees, the downstream effects of switching is like, oh, this isn't just going to be like switching. This is going to be like a issue. Like and it's going to be an issue multiplied by the number of people that were using this thing, or you know. So it's like you just like don't even experience as much downside risk.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wonder what those tools are that you churn 20 off. Are they the incumbents that you've had for years because they've served you really well? Right?
Dude, we churn off of all. Dude, this is the thing. We're like a bad customer to and this was my big realization. We're a bad customer to everyone. Like, and that's kind of exactly my point. Is like it kind of doesn't matter. Like you could be providing us sales tools, you could be providing us CS tools, you could be providing us engineering tools. Like, and so like now think about all of those companies, right? So like those companies are like, oh, we're like sales SaaS, we're CS SaaS, we are blah 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 blah. Like each of them, I am probably equally shitty. All of them.
But surely
I don't know, Zach, if you feel the same way, but like, dude, I'll give you an example. Okay, like our developer tools. Okay, we like 6 months ago, 100% of the company was on Cursor. Now, 0. Because everybody uses Cloud Code. Okay? In sales, it was like, whatever. A year ago, we were on Gong. Now we're on Glyphic. Customer success. A year ago, we were on, God, I don't even remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Now we're on like some custom built software, right? Like the list is endless, man. Like every department. And it's just because our evolution rate and like we just don't have any, like we don't hold anything dear basically at our scale and our stage.
That's so interesting. In my mind, there would be some things that would get baked in. The CRM comes to mind for me. Like, I'm not sure what you're using for CRM, but you tend to get married to your CRM, right? I would imagine that the really mature businesses are holding that space.
I think this is the same thing, dude. This is the same thing. It's like the total number of those is tiny. It's like literally just Salesforce and GCP. Those are the only two things that have held consistent. Like literally.
From day one,
even
the only thing that's held is GCP, Intercom, and Intercom might be removed probably whenever annual contract is done. But yeah, just GCP.
And these are huge. I mean, I wonder if that middle of the pack is getting squeezed out. Right? You mentioned Airtable, reinventing their product around AI. Are they like, well, we're going in one direction, right? We're going up or we're going down, right? I wonder if the new market entrants are squeezing people out.
He said that. Dude, this is, I mean, like, I don't know what's in his head, okay? But at least what he said on Lenny's podcast, which is like so astonishing to me and actually kind of inspiring. Like, I want to be clear. Like, I'm like watching this and I'm like, God, I'm so happy to be building a business right now. Because this is exciting. Like, these kinds of market dynamics, you don't get them that often. Right? Like, it's awesome that we get to build in a time like this. What Howie said was like, we grew up on PLG, and then we had a time in our company where we had to like switch and we did enterprise selling and this and that. And he literally says the words, and now we have like switched back to PLG to like serve the smallest companies to easily onboard them. And if you go to Airtable's website now, it looks like Lovables. Like if you go to airtable.com, it does not look like Airtable used to look. There's literally a text box that says like, what can I help you build today? Or something like that.
Yeah.
Total reinvention. And they went, and you're exactly right, Jack. They went straight back down to the smallest businesses or like single individuals. I mean, like it is like an unbelievable time. It is an unbelievable time. Yeah.
What do you think is the main signal in terms of the flow of funds? Is it consumer funds and what they're choosing to spend on? When I say consumer, I don't just mean the average consumer. I mean like in general, what the market's actually buying, or is it what people are investing into? Like what moves the market more?
Wow, dude, that's such a hard. First of all, great question. I have no effing idea because this is like, are we demand constrained or supply constrained in today's economy? That is such an effing good question, right? It's like you see a technology, you pump all this capital in, and all of a sudden you increase supply. It changes the market in a completely different way. It's so hard to know whether you're like, where are you on like the demand supply movement? I mean, excellent question. I've like literally not thought about it.
I'm not sure if I have like a good lay of the land. This is just my like, cursory glance of what's going on. But, it seems like there's lots of easy money that's entering the market and capital's flowing into equities. The stock market's up in dollar terms. M&A is up right now because everybody's rich. VC and PE are up because they're chasing risk.
Well, M&A is up because of the administration change.
Right.
Previously, like every fucking meaningfully sized M&A was blocked, and which then removes 90% of the off ramp for startup and scale up sort of like companies. And like the moment that floodgate opened, I just think that like the markets in general reacted like positively to it, because they're like, oh, the game board has reset to be fucking capitalism again.
Dude, Zach, my co-founder yesterday told, I don't know how I didn't know this, but the GDP print was at 3.3% growth in the US as of did you know this?
No.
I don't know how this isn't bigger news. That's a massive number. It hasn't crossed 2 in like decades. So Jack, I have no idea. Okay, but like and
But
I don't know
then
how that
the other
GDP
weird
number is
thing, though,
high
about,
and
like if you were to get into like this is like like right now the S&P is like valued at like something like 26 or 27 times like earnings or something. So it's like that's also the highest it's been in like a very long time. And like I actually watched this podcast with this guy, and he was pretty much just saying that like for all of history, whenever like the S&P was like valued anything over 25x earnings, essentially was just like followed up by like a very severe bear market, kind of like on the tail end of that. But again, like things are different, things changed, and then you have like the GDP growth. But it's just like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like if any of us knew all this information and knew what to do with it, we wouldn't be building companies, investing, and fucking living on a beach. So like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man.
I want to take the position of I think we're going to have a COVID era boom in e-commerce. I think I think everything's going to go to the moon.
on
I think,
ecom,
yeah, in e-com. Yeah. I think it's a very unpopular stance, but I think that
You really are the
nothing-
happiest man in ecom.
Yeah,
You have just
dude.
proven it.
I'll take I would definitely take the under on that.
What
Do you
gives you
thi-
the optimism? I'm curious. No, I'm genuinely curious. Yeah.
whereas with the optimism, I think that no one is going to want dollars, and everyone is going to want to spend dollars as quickly as possible and as much as possible. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot richer in dollar terms, and they already are, right? You were just talking about the S&P being up. That's for a reason, right? There's a lot more dollars, right? So it's only a certain percentage of the population, but I think that people are going to get richer, a lot richer in dollar terms.
Look, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. Yeah, it's like it is much harder for me to be cognizant or like for me to be confident that those dollars flow into goods. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of it goes into discretionary goods, which is like what Shopify is. Basically, it's like all discretionary goods, but yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I hope so.
I'd bet on luxury segment more than anything. And then
Did you say you bet on luxury
I would
more
bet
than
on
anything?
the same way they were talking about barbell. I
Me
think
too.
there's a barbell here. I'd bet on luxury, and then I'd bet on fucking Dollarama. And like, I think the middle is a bit miserable. I even just think about like my own personal spending. It very much is like value and luxury, and like this could be my personality, but I have zero desire to get the middle thing.
Yeah, I have no idea. My ability. Yeah. Anytime somebody tries to predict something, I feel like it's tough. It's tough. That's why you get like I refrain so much from predicting. I'm just like, this is what I'm observing, and it's like a crazy field, and I'm just like, yeah, let's just play the field. You know what I mean? And then the score is what the score is. So, yeah.
Do you think that one of the reasons we see so much pessimism, though, is that businesses that were rather unexceptional to begin with are dying? Like, I don't think we're seeing so many businesses that are really incredible businesses serving their customers very well that are going out of business. It tends to be the ones that just weren't cut out for it, or weren't cut out for it for as long as they were in the game for, right? And maybe they just aged out. Maybe new market entrants squeezed them out, and it was their time, right, to pass the baton.
No, I think most of the big name stuff that we've seen has come from the markets being too optimistic. Casper, Allbird, fucking all of that shit. It's usually not like the it's usually not like in a weird way, like it's not like the product or the market. It was like they played with fire and the fire got like way too big and they're like, holy fuck, the tree that's above the fire is now on fire and like we just gotta go. Rather than just having it just all bonfire. I feel like that's, I mean, but again, that could just be because like the big ones are the ones we hear about and like that's concentrated there. There's definitely a lot of other mid-sized businesses that just disappear, but you never hear about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it just doesn't make good news. So
Rashab, does Fermat start to serve non-e-commerce customers?
there is no chance that we do not serve non-e-com at some point. With 100% certainty, we will serve non-e-com at some point.
And do you know what that first market will be?
Dude, I mean, like, I'm yes.
I make a prediction?
And so, like, yes, it's going to happen sooner than later. And yeah, and this has always been but the point is, this has always been the plan. Like, and actually, my point is, you don't raise this kind of money if your end state goal is like, hey, I'm going to build, because of what Zach said, right? It's like nobody, like everybody involved is like a smart individual, right? And so it's like, of course, the end state goal is you got to be able to build something that's like an internet-wide opportunity. Otherwise, you're not plowing this amount of capital into it, right? It just doesn't make any sense to, right? It's like, I mean, we can talk about like previous cycles and things like that, about how there's like a lot of investment that happened that like there was just no way that it was going to end up in a good spot. But yeah, we have actually never raised in a peak market. Ironically. Yeah.
If I was Rashab, knowing limited about his business, and I wanted to pivot into one small sector that is a large sector, it would be financial services.
See, Zach, this is what I'm trying to tell you, man. The avoiding of the landmines is not a passive sport.
No, I mean what Fermat does for financial
I understand.
Services. Okay.
I understand. Yeah. And what I'm trying to tell you
You
is
can have
like,
that for free.
you saying that all you're doing is surviving over time is incorrect.
I didn't say that all I'm doing is surviving over time. I'm just saying
you're giving that illusion. You're giving that illusion. Yeah.
It has more. It has more. The side effect of that was more positive. Of that is more positive than what I once prescribed to it. I was like, this actually has value. Just being fucking solid business. You know?
Yeah. And what I would, and I'm just like, I mean, let's just use this toy example, like right at the end over here, but like you saying the words avoid the land, like let's just pretend in this context, like staying only in ecom is the landmine, and so you got to like avoid the landmine, and oh dude, like obviously consumer finance. And it's like, but that's not obvious, dude. It's like, because you know there's high LTV. It's because you know they spend a lot on CAC. And this is like actually my point, is the good operators know like what market dynamics are happening everywhere, and they can like make good moves and make good suggestions. And they're like, your avoidance of the landmine is extremely thought out, even though it is natural.
I think you just poked like a large hole in the way I was thinking about who I am, in like a positive way. You're right. I think we do. I'm like, oh yeah, just don't do anything stupid. But like, to not do anything stupid, you have to do stuff that's like at least not half retarded. So it's like, which maybe is harder than I think or something. But
yeah, I think it is much harder than you think. because there's a lot of information that goes into that decision that comes quote unquote obviously, right? And there's a lot of context there, right? It's like, yeah, we know that people spend a lot of money on acquiring people for like finance things, right? We know that like the credit card like rewards that you're getting or the sign up bonuses, like it's because you spend all of this time in the acquisition world that you're like, dude, obviously that's the place to go. Or for lead gen, you would be like, dude, obviously you want to go to legal and insurance. Like you would say these things and you would not think about it. Okay. And the problem is that it's precisely because of the context and knowledge. And so like my like to the listener, my only like hope is that what they're hearing is like, yeah, you've got to do the work. And yes, you have to be strategic about how you play the field, but like that is the difference between a good operator and a not good operator.
Yeah, I think you guys were agreeing before because that ties in perfectly with what Zach was saying about a business that's survived for 3 years at the same ARR as a business at 1
Totally.
year, right? It's because the operator, right?
Yeah, totally. This is a good note to end on.
Sweet. All right.
Yeah, this was
This
fun,
was a
guys.
fun one, man. All right. See you guys.
See you guys.
See ya.